This is the greatest game ever played between Hikaru Nakamura and Vladimir Kramnik. It's the Chess Olympiad 2012, September, USA versus Russia. Hikaru sits down and opens up here with Knight F3. A classic game to follow, and something happens in this game which is truly very, very, very rare. If we want to talk stats, I'm curious if anyone can let me know in the comments what percentage of games this actually happens in. So big bad Vladimir Kramnik goes knight f6. He's not really bad, great guy. We now get g3, g6. So Hikaru here looking to impress his high school chess coach, getting that king to safety immediately. And Vladimir is going for the copycat variation, well known to lead to a draw. Just keep copying your opponent's moves. That's a joke for anyone newer to chess. We now get c4, so Hikaru puts his cards on the table. We get c6, d4, d5. Chess.com is calling this the King's Indian defense here in the opening book. Don't know what that's all about. I've always known this to be the Neo Grunfeld opening. But anyway, potato, potato. We get captures here, many different moves. Knight c3, and now grandmasters at this level, they don't have to play by the same rules we do. We get knight e4, moving the same piece twice in the opening. Usually a no-no. You know, you could have gone knight c6 or castles. But you can't take this one, or pawn recaptures, kicks this one, and d4 gets weak. So instead, we get queen b3, pressuring the centre. Now we get captures, and this is the first notable moment of the game because the pawn structure has changed. So with this capture, you've now opened lines for this bishop and the rook down here, but you've got a backwards c pawn that's going to need babysitting. So we get castles. Knight d2. What's that all about? Why not castle? Well, Hikaru's now looking at pawn to e4. So we get e6 defending the centre, e4 attacking it, and now Kramnik plays this series of moves that just shows why these guys are on another level, right? He doesn't capture the pawn here on e4. He doesn't defend the pawn. He goes knight c6. Idea being, if you take, which wasn't played, well, now there's knight a5, the queen's got to run away somewhere, and even if you try and stay with the pawn, well, a6, you're eventually forced to give ground. Black recaptures, doing fine. So, coming back here, we didn't get the pawn captures, we had castles now played. And now knight a5 played voluntarily, kicking back the queen, queen c7, hitting the backwards c pawn, and now more brilliant super GM chess. You don't see bishop b2, passive defense, but queen f3, defending and attacking at the same time. Always brilliant if you can get one of your pieces to do that. Now b6, and once again, why is Vladimir not defending this pawn? Come on, that pawn needs some help, poor guy. Well, now there's bishop b7, and the pawn is pinned. If you keep on munching, you lose your queen, and if you move your queen, we'll find black takes back the pawn, and it's going to be a roughly level position. Black can press here. So, coming back, we didn't see after b6, we didn't see captures. We see bishop a3 instead, hitting the long diagonal. Rook d8 now played, and Hikaru makes a very committal move. You know, you could capture here, but he goes for e5. Now, why would he shut down his kind of central play here and leave himself with this long-term weakness? Well, he wants to attack Vladimir. This is now a forward position for his troops to rally around. He's got ideas of h4, h5, somehow bringing a knight round to g4 one day, try and swap these bishops, get this attack going. But here, bishop a6 shows what Vladimir wants to do, which is attack on the queen side. So the rook hit, and it comes to the e file. Why not the c file? Well, this is a pretty annoying move. So instead we see this, now rook ac8 hits that pawn, and again a rook doesn't defend, but the bishop defends. Now surely you're walking into knight c6, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. We're coming to it, because after bishop h6, hitting the unprotected knight, Queen d1 defending, now we get knight c6. The bishop drops, the pawn can no longer be taken, the knight blocks the file. It bounces back, the bishop bounces, and thankfully, after this bit of tickle here, we don't get a repetition of the position. Hikaru plays on, despite being worse, he goes for knight b1. Now keep your eye on that knight, because it goes on a hell of a journey. Remember, it started on g1 here. We now get pawn b5. Knight c4 was possible, but maybe Kramnik didn't fully see the plan after that. Now this is slightly risky because you make your bishop on a6 a tall pawn now. Look at all the pawns on light squares. That's a horrendous bishop. But soon Kramnik wants b4. So Hikaru just ignores all of that, goes pawn h4, looking for his own play. The knight jumps back for c6, 2c6, sorry, and now b4 is firmly on the cards. Excuse me. So how do you respond to that? Well, we get bishop c5. Now if b4, you can capture, and that's going to be a cemented wooden shield, as Hikaru would say. So queen b8 is played, and it's a multi-purpose sneaky move, because you're setting up b4, and there's another threat. Say you play king h2, just to show this one. Well, now there's knight takes on e5, and after rook takes, looks like everything's covered, but the rook crashes through here, distracting the pawn, and your loose rook drops off the board. Black is winning. So if we run back here, after queen b8, how do you respond to the dual threat? Well, the excellent queen to e2 is played, and maybe Kramnik missed this move, because now you can't do any of the tactics here. It's well enough reinforced. And you can't go b4. I mean, it looks like you walked into the x-ray, but of course the tables turn when you take the loose bishop. Now white is winning. So you can't go b4, which makes this one terrible. You can't take here. All your pieces are now in this huge kind of traffic jam piled up. How do you proceed? Well, knight a5. There's a thrashing knight, yo-yoing back and forth. That's when a plan has gone wrong. But don't assume the result of this game, by the way. It goes to the wire. Fascinating endgame. So we get knight d2. Here comes this piece which I mentioned, bouncing all over the board. And now great move by Kramnik. If he just goes too passive here, like say he goes knight c4, well, knight b3 comes. Whoops, where's my analysis? Knight b3 comes here. And now what to do for black? Where's your plan? You're a bit stuck for how to keep proceeding here. Meanwhile, white can turn to the king side, or maybe a well-timed a4, although actually you probably don't want to do that. You just help black out. So you probably just attack this king, right? So knight c4 not played. The excellent exchange sack was played. The rook crashes through on c5. Fantastic move. Pawn recaptures, and queen c8 the follow-up. And look at this trio now of weakened pawns. You could even say this one's a bit weak if you want to talk all of them. This one can't even be covered here, not in a great way. So Hikaru just ditches it, activates that knight, the pawn drops off the board, and now knight h2. I mean, look at the journey of this piece, springing all over the board and now heading for g4. And why wasn't this pawn captured? Well, without going down the whole line here, Kramnik's just scared to do that. You know, he helps white activate the rooks, then they could be invading here. I mean, first you'd go knight g4, kick the bishop, and basically there's this huge initiative for white. Sorry, excuse me. So the bishop drops back to g7, preempting knight g4. Now we get h5 from Hikaru, his other attacking idea. So g5 played to keep lines shut. Vlad desperate to achieve pawn h6, but Hikaru gets to the punch just in time. Bishop captures, and queen h5 is the follow-up. No time for king g7, defend that one, or you walk into knight g4, that's dropping off the board. So bishop g7 played, the g5 pawn drops, rook is hit, undefended, so knight c6 jumps back and covers. This piece is just a pure yo-yo this game. Now knight g4, and here Vladimir's forced to play a move he wouldn't normally want to play, which is queen e7. When you're material down, you know, an exchange down, you don't typically want to start trading pieces off, especially the queens. But there's too many threats around the king. So Hikaru captures, the knight takes back, and now pawn a4, peeling that a file open like a banana here, trying to get that rook active. And now this is the difference between computer chess and human chess. So top computer move is takes. After recaptures, bishop b5, takes here, just defend the knight, and the computer says this is the most precise way for black to play. Grovel on and exchange down, try and hold this, right? But it's a passive defense, not an active defense. Very tough for humans. So what does Kramnik do? Well, now he goes d4, and it puts already a question to Hikaru. Do you take here? Do you take here? Do you go knight f6, top computer move? Well, Hikaru goes for this one. Bishop recaptures, crashes through, hitting the knight, but Kramnik plays this great move now. Doesn't move the knight. Looks like you have to, but he pushes on with d3. And this is the thing, the time is now getting low. Who knows what happens in these kind of situations? So here Hikaru does take up the gauntlet, capture that knight, best move, the pawn hits d2, rook d1, but bishop e2, hitting two pieces here. So knight e3, forced, covers the rook on d1, and now don't cash in too soon, not the best way to play. We get bishop takes on e5, threatening the c3 pawn, which was allowed to survive earlier by that black queen, but now c4. And this is Hikaru's big asset. If he can consolidate, use his extra exchange and pass c-pawn. But first he's got this to contend with, and h5. Here Kramnik's looking to go h4, pawn recaptures, bishop f4, start doing some nasties. So rook a7 played, looking to re-enter the game. Pawn h4 and rook a2. You know, Hikaru doesn't want to take. Allow this stuff. He's pressuring the pawn here, threatening to win it. So now Vladimir cashes in on d1. This knight recaptures. We see pawn captures, takes back, bishop takes, and now c5. Past pawns need to be pushed. Push 'em, baby, as Yasser would say. f5 played, and look at this for a connect 3 for Kramnik. This is the thing, when you stop for breath, do a material count. Well, Hikaru's got the extra knight, but it's for two pawns, and they're all connected. So this is dangerous. You know, Vladimir's got great drawing chances here. So rook a7 played to cut that king. We get pawn e5, c6, e4, shuts out this bishop, so it looks for life on this diagonal. Plus, supports that queening square. And so Kramnik plays rook to c8. He's looking to swap c-pawn for f-pawn, which is a bad trade for white. You know, then it leads to a draw. So rook a6 was played to cover this pawn, and now the rook slides all the way back to f8, defending this one and threatening to push those black pawns. So rook a5 was played, hits f5 for a second time. Now we see f4, and these pawns are coming fast. You know, you can do this, make a queen, force the rook to give itself up, but then these ones come through way too fast here. So that wasn't played. Instead, king f1, sliding over in front of the pawns. Rook g5 was also an option there, looking to sacrifice. But Hikaru goes with this one. They're very low on time. Now we see this pawn come to e3, completing the connect 3, and look at that for a picture. This was in the thumbnail. I was having some fun painting. Went a bit Bob Ross on it. Who remembers this guy, by the way?
Then we'll fluff it a little, like so, and very gently. One hair and some air. Whisper light. This is a very simple painting that you can do, even if you've never painted before. So, from all of us here, I'd like to wish you happy painting, and God bless, my friend.
What a legend. So the king now comes to e2 to support this little critter down on d1. We get rook f6, waiting move. What's the idea of this? Well, now if you go c7, there's f3, check, king takes this pawn, and now the bishop captures here. Again, the moment you drop this pawn off, you're making a draw. So we don't see c7. Hikaru checks, the king steps up. We get check once more. Now, why doesn't the king step away, you know, back to g8 here, for example? Well, now c7 can come on the board, because this time if check and rook king captures here, well, after bishop takes, the rook takes back. This is winning. So after rook a7 check, we get the rook interposing. You can swap those rooks off now, but Hikaru goes rook b7. Now king f6, looking to bring that one to the action. reaction, king f3, rook e7 played, looking for e2, and so now Hikaru chops those ones off the board. King recaptures, c7, and look at the barrier that the pawn forms with the bishop. So that one's going through. e2 now from Kramnik. We've reached the climax, because how do you play here? What's the move to keep the advantage? Well done if you did not play or think to play king takes on e2. Now there's check, king takes, the pawn drops. Again, this is a draw. But what did we see instead? Well, after e2, we get c8 equals knight. What an awesome under promotion. And this is my question at the start. How often does this happen in chess games? You know, what percentage see not only the promotion of a pawn, but an under promotion of a pawn? Must be incredibly low, right? So rare. So that one's made on the board. Now we get king f6, moving away from the check. You know, why make a knight with check? Well, now black never got time to make the queen in return. So you take here, king e5, but now look at this. These pieces start coming around into the game, and they're just too powerful. The pawn's dropping off, and now they start to corral that enemy king. All Kramnik can do is thrash with the bishop. The knights come around. It's an 80 move game, and here we had resignation from Kramnik because mate is coming. You can't avoid it. The king's boxed in here, as we can see. You know, say you go for a waiting move, well then check, king to the corner, and this delivers the mate. And even if you waited with the bishop on this diagonal, well then you could have delivered the mate on this diagonal. So it was just unavoidable. Stunning game between these two players. I hope you enjoyed. Check out the video on screen for another epic game of chess, and thanks very much for watching. See you soon.